Good evening. Welcome to this Republican primary debate for mayor of New York City. I'm Errol Lewis, the political anchor for Spectrum News New York 1. Over the next hour, you will hear the two Republican candidates who want to succeed Bill de Blasio and become mayor of New York. They're going to weigh in on issues of importance to all New Yorkers as we rapidly approach primary day on June 22nd. Tonight's debate is brought to you by us here at Spectrum News New York 1, as well as our editorial partners, WNYC Gothamist and The City, and our co-sponsors. They are Citizens Union, the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and Social Work Votes, which is part of the Columbia School of Social Work and the Latino Leadership Institute as well. Tonight's debate comes as New Yorkers are rapidly emerging from a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and slowly confronting many questions about the future of our city, including concerns about the economy and the balance between crime fighting and police reform. It also comes as a fierce primary is underway among Democratic candidates. And although the majority of registered voters in our city are Democrats, there are more than 500,000 Republicans as well. And politicians running on that ballot line have served as mayor for 20 of the last 27 years. Joining me tonight in my questioning are the co-moderators, Brian Lehrer of WNYC Radio and Jolessa Velasquez of The City. Due to the pandemic, the two candidates will be joining us remotely tonight. They are Fernando Mateo and Curtis Sliwa. Welcome, candidates. Now, the rules that you see on your screen now have all been agreed to by the candidates. Each candidate will get a chance to deliver an opening statement of 45 seconds or less. Answers to our questions will be limited generally to 60 seconds. Candidates may be given a chance for short rebuttals, and the candidates will get to ask each other a question in our cross-examination round. We're going to start with opening statements. The order of tonight's opening statements was determined by a random drawing, and so we'll begin with Curtis Sliwa. Good evening.
Thank you, Errol. I've been founder and leader of the Guardian Angels, providing safe streets and safe subways here in New York City and in cities around the world for 42 years. But on March 15th, I decided that I had to run for mayor to refund the police, to hire more police, and to make sure we keep the qualified immunity for them. In addition, I'm the only candidate who has said that I will investigate Thrive, a program that has already spent $1.25 billion of our tax dollars and has not helped the helpless souls out there, the emotionally disturbed persons who roam the streets and the subways and are needing care, a danger to themselves and everyone else. And what I'm most proud of yesterday, when we delivered to the Board of Elections thousands and thousands of signatures for the first ever animal welfare line. Because as someone who raises 15 rescue cats with my wife, Nancy, in the Upper West Side, for the first time, when I'm mayor, New York City will have no-kill shelters. We are not killing our friends, these dogs and cats that are euthanized within 72 hours. Okay. So I will crack down on crime that is paralyzing our city, as I've done for 42 years. But I'm the compassionate candidate that will care for the emotionally disturbed, the homeless, and our friends, the cats and dogs who are euthanized now.
All right. Thank you very much. And now an opening statement from Fernando Mateo.
My name is Fernando Mateo, and for the last 30 years, I have done real things to change real lives in New York City. Started in 1989 when I went to Rikers Island and I taught, trained, and found employment for first-time nonviolent offenders. In 1993, as Rudy Giuliani, the first Republican mayor that we had 20 years ago, came into office, we were able to get thousands of guns off the city streets. In 1999, we formed the New York State Federation of Taxi Drivers, and we saved thousands of lives of cab drivers that work our city streets. And in 2002, we did the same for the bodega owners that were getting shot, robbed, looted, murdered. We were able to change the lives of so many people in New York City. I am compelled to run for mayor of New York City because it's the right time. We need a mayor like me. We need a mayor that's going to create change, a mayor that's really going to crack down and bring our police department to where it needs to be. Bail reform, defund the police was my opponent's responsibility. He is partly responsible for bail reform and defund the police because he supported and endorsed every single Democrat that voted for those laws. And today we're going to take the mask off his face and show every Republican out there who the true Republican is here. I don't understand why I have an opponent running as a Republican when he's never been a Republican. And that's what New York City needs to know. If you want change, you want honest change. You don't want lies. You don't want fabricated stories. You don't want people that are taking credit for things they've never done. And that's why I am running for mayor. And with your blessings, I will be your next mayor in New York City.
Okay, thank you, candidates. I'm going to start with the first question. We're going to begin this debate with the national conversation about policing. This debate, of course, takes place 1 year after the killing of George Floyd, which triggered demonstrations nationwide, including here in New York. It comes at the same time, though, as homicides are up 22% compared to the first 5 months of last year, and shootings are up by more than 81% year to date. You've both been vocal about increasing the use of traditional NYPD tactics, including increased subway patrols, gun interception units, and the like. You've also been publicly opposed to bail reform and other changes in the criminal justice system. But are there any police reforms that you do support? Let's start with you, Mr. Mateo.
I support giving the police department the leadership that they need. I support making sure that NYPD has a real leader, someone that's going to have their backs 100%, like I've done for the last 30 years. I've worked hand in hand with NYPD to make sure that we bring crime down. And I've been there assisting them when they needed help identifying people that had committed crimes in the city. There's only one leader in New York City, and that's the mayor. And as mayor, I will make sure that my police commissioner has every authority to make sure they watch out for the rank and file. A lot of the times a police commissioner is appointed and he's afraid of his shadow. He's afraid to back up his men and women. With me, I will make sure that my police commissioner stands shoulder to shoulder with every man and woman in blue, and they get the support that they need to keep our city safe. I will make sure that we have 2 police officers on every subway platform, creating safe haven train stations, platform, so that if anyone in the street needs help, they know that if they run into the subway system, they will find the help that they need. We need to get thousands more cops out on the streets to show a presence, of respect.
Okay.
Our chiefs, our captains, our lieutenants, our sergeants will be out on the streets with the men and women that they're serving.
Okay, well, let me follow up with that, Mr. Mateo. For example, do you think the NYPD commissioner should have fired Daniel Pantaleo over the killing of Eric Garner in 2014?
I believe that the police commissioner should have reviewed what happened, and if he felt that there was that the conduct was inappropriate, he should do what he has to do. Mm-hmm. I will make sure that the police commissioner thoroughly investigates whatever crimes are committed by cops or against cops. As far as I'm concerned, we have a great police department. We have a department that has done the right thing for decades in this city. Of course, you're going to get 1 or 2 bad apples. You get them out of the way. You make sure that your police department engages with the community, engages with the kids, engages with the small businesses, and they become a presence. They become partners in New York City with the small business, with the different communities.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Sliwa has something to say here.
Wow, what revisionism when the NYPD closed your club, La Marina, in Washington Heights, after all the complaints about drug dealings, crime on the presence, noise. You publicly said on Hot 97, the morning radio program, that all those cops responsible for that, they should have their heads cut off like snakes. That's in your own words, Fernando Mateo. You were running a criminal enterprise. All of a sudden, you've discovered you have love for the police. By the way, when it comes to subways and dealing with subway crime, you don't ride the subways. I ride the subways every day. I've been patrolling the subways. We need 4,500 uniformed transit cops, 500 undercover cops. We need 500 MTA cops that Governor Cuomo promised before the lockdown to stop fare evasion because it's depleting the system. And you don't just need cops on a platform to style and profile. You need them on the moving trains, patrolling from the back car to the front car, as we, the Guardian Angels, have done for 42 years. So, Fernando, You haven't ridden the
All
subway.
right, let's give him
You lived up in Westchester, in Irvington. There is no subway stop in Irvington.
Give him a chance to
Westchester.
respond, Mr. Mateo.
Well, as we all see, Curtis is a comedian. He's a wannabe actor. He's a wannabe phony person that has lied his entire career to get attention. And that's what he is doing now. He's fabricating lies against the person that at 17 got married, started his own business, carpeted his house, and created so many jobs for people in New York City. Curtis, you've got to stop lying. You accused the police department cops of having kidnapped you, and you admitted it was a lie. You accused cops, you called the cops to say someone sprayed KKK on your property when that was all fabricated. You were sued by the Newark Police Department for falsely accusing them of doing things that they hadn't done. Curtis, you are a liar, a compulsive liar, and you have nothing else to do. You should be a train conductor. Do you want to spend so much time in the train? Become a train conductor.
Do you want to answer?
It's not my fault if I can afford to take a cab.
Let Mr. Sliwa answer if you choose to, and if not, I've got some other things I'd like to talk about with you.
Take a cab. Some of the guys who used to frequent your club ended up shooting me in the back of a cab in 1992.
Okay.
Members of organized crime. The guy said, get me. So, Fernando, you have associated with organized crime members. You're no friend of the police.
You're a character that's never worked for a living. You've lived off of the Guardian Angels your whole life. You don't even know how to go out there and work it to make money, Curtis. Please, you're not a Republican. That's the bottom line.
Hold on. Stop. Everybody stop. I got a question for you, Mr. Sliwa. Do you think at present the commissioner has nearly unchecked and sole discretion when it comes to disciplining cops? Do you support giving more disciplinary authority to the CCRB or other entities besides the sole discretion of the commissioner? Or are there any other reforms that you would actually champion for the NYPD?
The police department has more agencies overseeing it than any other entity in city government. For instance, you have the district attorneys. You have the state attorney general, Tish James. Sometimes you've had a federal monitor. You have the CCRB. And now there's a move to take out all control of the police from the police commissioner. You think maybe we should do that for many of the corrupt politicians who have been indicted and are doing time now for setting up fake, phony nonprofits, as Fernando Mateo was helping Bill de Blasio do when he gave him illegal campaign contributions to elect a mayor who single-handedly destroyed the city of New York. And by the way, look at this federal picture taken by the FBI of you hugging Fernando Mateo, hugging Bill de Blasio, who you raised funds for.
Okay, all right. No props. No props, Curtis. This is not the old show. We're not going to do props. A real brief response, Mr. Mateo, then we're going to move on to another topic.
Well, once again, Curtis is a clown. I think his red beret is too tight on him. He never voted for Trump. He never supported the president that really backed law enforcement. He made sure that Marty Golden lost his job as our Republican senator in Albany. He made sure that Rob Astorino didn't stand a chance in Westchester County. All he's ever done is work against the Republican Party and Republican candidates. Mind you, I'm the only Hispanic immigrant that has ever spoken at the Republican National Convention. I had that honor. While Curtis was with the Reform Party, with the Independent Party, with the Democrats, doing feast. You know what? Like me, I donate money to many different people. Like Trump donated money to many different people. Like Cassimatidis, his boss that's paying his bills, donates money to many other candidates. Listen, I have the right to donate to whomever I believe I need to donate to because I watch out for my constituents.
Okay.
And most importantly, Errol, I need Democrats to donate to me. Because I'm a Republican, I am not going to turn that money down.
Point well taken. In fact, we're going to talk politics now. Let me turn it over to Brian Lehrer. He wants to talk about politics with you in a different way. Go ahead, Brian.
Sure. Thank you, Errol. Good evening, candidates. Good evening, TV viewers and radio listeners. Candidates, do either of you think that President Trump actually won re-election? Curtis, do you?
No.
Mr. Mateo?
I think he won re-election. Yes, I do. I believe Donald Trump was a good president. He did the right thing. He fulfilled his promises. And I make sure, and I will make sure that when I am mayor of this city and I make promises, I keep them the way he kept them. Donald Trump was a president that protected law enforcement officers. And I believe that that's what we need in this city, someone that will protect law and order.
Ryan, recently again on Hot 97, your morning program, Fernando Mateo said, President Trump, he was arrogant. He didn't represent all the people. This is your own words, Fernando. Your own words.
Listen, you're not on your radio talk show.
No,
and you're not on your TV show at New York One because you got fired. Let's face it, you were fired from New York One because you wanted to have sex with a city council. You were fired, Curtis. And most importantly, you're not on your radio show. You don't need to be a comedian. You gotta take that red.
I'm going to ask you both to cool it for the moment. I don't want to have to ask the control room to dim your microphones. Let me go on to more of these political questions about you as Republicans. New York City's only Republican in Congress, Nicole Malliotakis, who of course was also the party's last nominee for mayor, voted on January 6th not to accept the election results. Did she do the right thing, in your opinion, Mr. Mateo?
I believe that she was looking for justice. She was looking to make sure that if there was fraud committed, that it would be investigated and it would come to light. Listen, mistakes are made, fraud is committed, you do an investigation, and you see what the results are. So I commend Congresswoman Malliotakis for doing what she did because she's a true Republican.
Okay, so that answer is clear. I want to keep it moving because our time is limited. Mr. Sliwa, same question.
Well, can I answer that, Brian? Can I answer that? Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis supports Curtis Sliwa.
Really? She hasn't come out to say that?
As almost all the elected Republicans do in Staten Island and Brooklyn. You have no support of elected officials, Fernando Mateo. Nicole Malliotakis is supporting Curtis Sliwa to become the next mayor. Why don't you just acknowledge
that? You on the record. In your opinion, did she cast the right vote on January 6th not to accept all the electoral votes? Mr. Sliwa,
yes,
did she?
Because she wanted an investigation, and obviously she was entitled, and we were entitled to an investigation.
All right. So let me ask you next about electability. In our city that is so heavily Democratic by party enrollment, you're going to need independents to vote for you. You're going to need Democrats, registered Democrats to vote for you. Mayor Bloomberg running as a Republican, got a lot of independents and Democrats. Mayor Giuliani running as a Republican, got a lot of independent Democrats. Make your case to the Republican primary voters watching and listening right now that you would actually have the better chance to win in November based on your electability and getting enough of those crossover votes. Mr. Sliwa, go first on this one.
Well, number one, and you can't refute this, Fernando, I'm up in the most recent polls, 34% versus you. And more importantly, I have now two separate lines in the general election, in addition to the Republican line, an independent line and the animal welfare line, the no-kill shelter line. That's going to provide not only Democrats, but independents, others who would never vote for a Republican, two opportunities to vote for me. And let's be honest. When it comes to animal welfare and protecting our beloved cats and dogs, let's face it, that brings Trumpers together with those who voted for Biden, with those who are not involved in politics. It's going to give a lot of people an opportunity to look at me as someone who can be a mayor of all the people of New York City. And that's what I'll be able to do.
Same question. Why would you be the more actually electable one in November?
Well, first of all, Curtis is not electable in the general election, and that's why he's running as a Republican. Democrats want him to win because if he wins, they know that they have a clear path to City Hall. Fernando Mateo is the only Republican candidate that can bring over 500,000 Democratic voters to vote for him. I did it for Michael Bloomberg. I delivered the votes, the Hispanic votes that he needed to win the mayoralship of New York City. There are 2.5 million Hispanics in New York that dislike Curtis Sliwa. Those 2.5 million Hispanics that are out there, that voting bloc will vote for me, not because I am Hispanic, but because of the work, the hard work that I've done over the last 30 years for the Hispanic community. I count on Staten Island, I count on Brooklyn, but I want you to know that I was endorsed by the Manhattan GOP, the Bronx GOP, and the Queens GOP. Half of Brooklyn is mine. Most of Staten Island will be delivered for me. Curtis Sliwa has no chance in the general election.
Answers.
No chance whatsoever.
Thank you both. We're out of time for this round. Thank you both very much for your answers on electability.
Thank you.
Josefa Velasquez, over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening, gentlemen. So the next topic we want to discuss is the economy. We asked the Democratic mayoral candidates a similar question at their debate 2 weeks ago. The next mayor is going to inherit a city that's still reeling from the pandemic. Thousands of tourism and hospitality jobs haven't recovered. Many office workers who previously flocked to Manhattan are still working from home. And if you walk around the city, you see a lot of vacant storefronts. Both of you have been very vocal about the need to improve public safety. So besides fighting crime, how will you bring these jobs back? Mr. Sliwa, let's start with you.
Well, first off, you have to start with safe streets and safe subways. People won't come back to work. People won't visit the city. When people read around the world as transportation opens up to New York City, the 3 people were recently shot in Times Square. They're not going to want to come to the city. So if you're providing safe streets and safe subways, as I've done as leader of the Guardian Angels for 42 years, by refunding the police, hiring more police, and allowing them to go out and do the jobs, that leads towards economic recovery. And we've got to open up the city. Restaurants, bars, nightlife completely opened up. And we have to be able, in many instances, to help business people who want to get involved in capitalism. I have a program for those who want to start a business to be able to get involved in many of these commercial spaces that are empty, that just can't be repurposed for affordable housing. And that is the opportunity to open up a business in which you cut through all the red tape, the licenses, the permits, you give them an easy pass. And then you give them micro loans and you provide mentors to train them how to avoid the pitfalls of business. You cap property tax, no property tax. And most importantly, to encourage people to stay, because that's a key to the vitality of New York. For those who are 65 and older, earn $75,000, no property taxes on their houses. We want them to stay and spend their money here.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mateo, over to you.
He used twice the amount of time you gave him. But I want you to know that we don't have safe streets. We don't have safe streets in New York. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. We don't have safe streets in New York City because of Curtis Sliwa, because of the people he supported, because of the Democrats he supported. I've been in business my entire life. I know how to create jobs. I have met payroll. I pay rent. I pay taxes. Curtis has no business experience whatsoever. He says, you have to. You have to what? If you've never created a job in your life. I know what to do to bring businesses back. The same opportunities we were giving Amazon by giving them a 10% payroll tax break, I will do, not for 25,000 jobs, but for 500,000 jobs. I would give small businesses those tax breaks and the incentives to come back to New York. Besides, I will make sure that every city agency is their friend. City agencies destroy small businesses. They are the biggest obstacle that we have. Why? Because politicians or people that just don't understand business don't get it. They don't understand that small businesses need support. They don't need to be torn down by every city agency. That is why I will be the mayor to bring our economy back.
What would you like to say?
You know, it's interesting. You were missing in action, Fernando, in this last election cycle. I was supporting State Senate candidate Vito Bruno, Law and Order versus Gunardis. Where were you in Brooklyn? I was supporting Ariello for borough president, Republican, against Donovan Richards. Where were you? John Cummings up in the Bronx against AOC, Law and Order. Where were you? I was there supporting them. And Nicole Malliotakis against Max Rhodes for the congressional seat. I was there supporting them, campaigning with them. These are all Republicans. Where were you? You were missing in action.
Okay.
By the way, I didn't see you at any Trump rallies. You didn't make any comments about Donald Trump for president, did you?
To the New York City economy. So this is a question for both of you. Mr. Mateo, as you have said, you're a business owner. One of your campaign platforms is to cut some of the red tape. So what would you get rid of and what would replace it?
Well, first of all, when you rent a small location to build a business in New York City, you have to deal with the Department of Buildings. It will take you a year from start to finish before you're able to open your business. I would streamline that and make sure that every contractor can self-certify their work until the Department of Building gets around to doing an inspection. This way, you don't hold their cash. You don't hold their cash up. You make sure that every small business has a relationship with city agencies so that they can execute and open their businesses rather rapidly. It's important for you to understand that I live this every single day. I employ thousands of people in New York City, and I know what our city needs when it comes to rebuilding our businesses. Our theater district, our nightlife. You go to Miami, and every nightlife establishment has a patrol car in front of it that's paid by that nightlife establishment. They don't allow that in New York City. I will allow it. I will make sure that every small business man and women that's law-abiding can exercise their Second Amendment right and carry a weapon to defend themselves against people that are out there to kill them. I will make sure that every law-abiding New Yorker has that right because it's a right. It's not a privilege.
Thank you. Mr. Sliwa, same question for you. What would you do for these small businesses to try to cut some of the red tape?
Well, the biggest small business of all are the small landlords, the men and women who have maybe a single family home, two-family home, maybe 4 apartments. And, you have rent stabilization. That's about 50% of the renters, rent control about 1%. And look at what's happened with the moratorium on those who pay rent. Here it is, the landlords, the owners, they've had to not only pay for improvements of the property each year, about 4%, but every year an increase in their property tax, 6%, and they've gotten no relief from any agencies during COVID-19. Now, if these pre-war buildings are abandoned because they're already in decline, then we are going to suffer the same kind of problems we did in the 70s and the 80s when we saw abandonment of buildings, property values dropping, and New Yorkers fleeing. Remember, 1 million people fled New York City in the 70s. 300,000 have already fled New York City. And I want to create an environment where people are going to stay, they're going to invest, they're going to continue to invest in their properties so that people have decent housing to live in, and make sure that the quality of life is improved by supporting our police and refunding our police.
Thank you, Mr. Sliwa. That's all the time we have for this section. Errol, over to you.
Thank you, Josefa. Gentlemen, I have a question. We're going to talk a little bit about public health, an issue of major importance as we come out of this pandemic, which killed tens of thousands of our neighbors. The next mayor is going to inherit a city in which there's a possibility that a variant of COVID or perhaps an entirely new disease could require the kind of shutdown that we saw last year. Now, if a similar situation should arise, meaning public health restrictions are once again called for, how will you, if you're the mayor, handle the situation, and how should the city enforce those rules? Let's start with you, Mr. Sliwa.
Number one, we will never do what both de Blasio and Cuomo did to us and crushed the life out of our city with these executive orders that were nonstop, just squeezing the life out of our citizens and the economic vitality. There is a way to follow the science, and there is a way to continue to conduct normal life and have places of business open and allow restaurants and bars and actually our cultural entities and entertainment entities that attract people from all over the world to continue. but we can't make the same mistake. New York City is the largest city with the slowest recovery rate of any in the nation. And it's because of Mayor de Blasio and Cuomo, who can't get along, who can't agree on anything, pointing fingers at one another. And as a result, we have all been victims of that. We're never going back to doing those things again.
Well, I mean, Mr. Sliwa, your relationship with the governor is not that great either. What would you do if you're sworn in, say, on January 1st, and God forbid we should have some kind of a public health emergency, and you get the order from the state that we have to start going back to capacity restrictions, mask mandates, and so forth? What would you do?
I would argue with the governor publicly and privately about what the science says, because oftentimes Governor Cuomo has not followed the science. Look at most recently, the CDC and even President Joe Biden said, you no longer have to socially distance or wear a mask if you received your vaccines. The governor was very slow to react. In fact, most recently, he wanted 2-year-old children to wear masks in preschool, and then he had to roll back on that. So you have to challenge the governor, but you also have to respect him and have private meetings and have your staffs working together. Unfortunately, we don't have complete home rule. Okay. We're still subject to state dictates, and you have to try to cooperate as best you can, but we can never go back to what was. And they want to put vaccine passports out there? Absolutely not. In order for you to be able to work, for you to be able to travel, be able to live a normal life, we're going to achieve herd immunity. There's no need for that. And that's what de Blasio and Cuomo are talking about.
All right, Mr. Mateo, same question. What, God forbid, we should have either another relapse of the COVID problem or an entirely new disease. What will you do if these kind of restrictions are required again?
I would do what our president did, what Donald Trump did at the time. Follow the science. Make sure that every city across the United States understood what was going on and made the changes as they were supposed to make them. He was the person who accelerated the vaccines. He was the person that made what's happening today happen. It wasn't Joe Biden. It wasn't the person that Curtis Sliwa endorsed over Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump who took this case seriously. I'm a communicator. I communicate. I've been doing that all my life. When you're in business, you communicate with different industries. You communicate with thousands of people that you employ. I'm a communicator. Curtis Sliwa is a subway rider. That's all he knows how to do. Communicate with the subway homeless people, because that's what he takes pride in. And he communicates with his 13 cats and his 14 litter boxes in his house. That's what he does. But over here, he's trying to pull the wool over our eyes and pretend that he knows what he's talking about and he knows what he's going to do with the economy. And if a disaster happens, he has the solution for it. Guys, Curtis Sliwa is a guardian angel. He should be a train conductor. He is not a Republican. He didn't support Donald Trump. We are Republicans. This is a Republican primary, and it is a very serious one. And we need to take it seriously, because if I do not win these primaries, we will have another Democrat for 8 years, because Democrats will not vote for Curtis Sliwa. He has not earned it. He has not done the job. He's never employed anyone. He's never owned a small business. Listen, I'm not an angry person. I'm a passionate person.
Yeah, no, let him respond. Mr. Mateo, let him respond.
There he goes clowning around.
No, let him respond.
He goes clowning around. But listen, this is about a serious race.
Absolutely.
This is about taking our city.
That's why we're doing the debate.
This is about taking our city back.
Mr. Mateo, stand by. Go ahead, Mr. Sliwa.
Bill de Blasio single-handedly destroyed this city.
Along with you. Along with
Fernando Mateo.
Along with you.
Fernando Mateo.
Along with you, Curtis.
Look
along with you.
Come on, let's not do this again. Guys, let's not do this again. Let's not do this again.
I take pictures I take pictures with everyone.
Let's bring him down, take down the volume. All right, guys. I think that is the end of that conversation. We're going to go to Brian Lehrer now. We're going to give you a short lightning round, some short questions for you to answer. Take it away, Brian.
Thank you, Errol. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you a few education-related lightning round questions and a few on climate and the city. Most of these are yes or no questions, so please give me yes or no answers. We now have universal pre-K. would you commit to finishing the job of making 3K universally available? Yes or no, Mr. Mateo?
Yes.
Mr. Sliwa?
Yes.
Would reducing racial segregation in the public schools be a priority of your administration, Mr. Sliwa?
No.
Mr. Mateo?
No.
Should the SHSAT exam be the only criteria for admission into the elite specialized high schools like Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, and Bronx Science? Should the test continue to be the only criterion, Mr. Mateo?
Yes.
Mr. Sliwa?
Yes.
Should the schools teach that Columbus, quote, discovered America? Mr. Sliwa?
Yes.
Mr. Mateo?
Yes, he did.
Do you support raising the limit on new charter schools for the city, Mr. Mateo?
Yes.
Mr. Sliwa?
Yes.
Do you think, Mr. Sliwa, that the de Blasio administration did enough to enforce education standards for yeshivas in their general education or non-religious subjects? Did de Blasio do enough to enforce those standards, Mr. Sliwa?
No.
Mr. Mateo?
No.
Should students in the public schools be required to get the COVID vaccine to return in person if it's fully approved for their age group, like many colleges are requiring of their students? Mr. Mateo?
No.
Mr. Sliwa?
No.
All right, a few on climate now. Do you each believe that man-made climate change is real? Mr. Sliwa, do you?
Yes.
Mr. Mateo?
Yes.
And so now a short answer. What's one big threat to New York that you see from it that you would try to address as mayor? Mr. Mateo?
I would make sure that every New Yorker and every risk taker in New York City has an opportunity to succeed. I will stand with them and I will encourage them to come back and bring the economy back. I would welcome the rich and I would engage them with the poor. I will make sure that foundations and philanthropists...
Forgive me, it's a climate change question, a climate change threat that you would address.
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
It's a climate change question. What's one threat from climate change that you just said is real that you would address as a priority as mayor?
I would try to make sure that every bus, that most cars in New York City could run on batteries, could run on electricity. Okay. And we would get rid of all of the gasoline vehicles
Mr.
out there.
Sliwa, same question. One threat that you would prioritize a response to as mayor regarding climate change.
We are going to have another Superstorm Sandy soon, and we have not prevented the shores completely in order to be protected. Clean water also could be threatened in that kind of a situation. So we've got to do so much more. The federal dollars were there, but the de Blasio administration has not put up the seawalls that they should have, the dirges and everything else along our coastline to protect those vulnerable areas, because we know it's going to happen again.
Candidates, thank you for your answers to those questions. Errol, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. Gentlemen, it's time for our cross-examination round. That's when each candidate gets a chance to ask one question of his rival. Our order was selected at random. Let's begin with Curtis Sliwa.
Fernando Mateo, you claim you're the only Republican in this race. Why did you call Bill de Blasio an honorable man and raise illegal campaign contributions for him that helped him ruin this city for what will be 8 years?
Curtis, once again, you're making up stories, you're making up lies, and people shouldn't believe you because you have a record of just lying. I never did any of the things that you said I did. I never raised illegal donations. I never personally made a donation to de Blasio. My constituents did, just like the mayor. Look at the poster. Advocate says he funneled de Blasio donors to pay to play. You know what? Once again, Curtis, you're a clown, and you're making a mockery out of this very important primary. I think, Errol, that this is important for the viewers, and what he is doing is a mockery. of the Republican Party and of our primary elections. And you need to stop it because it's not fair that this guy's making a mockery out of what he's doing.
Mr. Mateo, let me answer my version of that question. You did bundle some money for candidate de Blasio. That is true. Okay, so that's your answer.
That is true, yes. Okay, yes, it's true. I bundled money. Bundling is not illegal, and we need to all know that because Curtis lies and he tries to put things in people's minds that do not exist.
Okay, so
Casamatides bundled $50,000 for de Blasio. Donald Trump bundled millions of dollars for Hillary and Bill Clinton. I mean, that's what we do when we're in business. Curtis has never been in business. He's a subway rider. He doesn't understand these things. He doesn't understand that you cross donations.
Got it.
When after the primaries, Errol, I need for every Democrat to make a donation to my campaign, and I will accept it. That's the way we do business in New York City.
Got it. Okay, Mr. Mateo, your turn to ask a question.
My question is to Curtis: why did he vote against? Why did he endorse Donald Trump's opponent? Number one, why did he just become a Republican to destroy any opportunity that we have as a party to win back our city? Those are the two questions that I want him to answer. When did he become a Republican? And why did he become a Republican when he was never a Republican? Please answer that question.
First off, I want to thank you for saying
answer the question.
I'm the only candidate who rides the subways.
Answer the question.
Because that's exactly true. I am the only candidate who rides the subways.
Answer the question.
Number two, I've had a love-hate relationship with former President Donald Trump and citizen Donald Trump going back 30 years. And I never voted for Hillary. I never voted for Joe Biden.
That's not the question.
Let him finish.
Independent. And by the way, I was a registered Republican in New York City before you were.
Answer the question.
You just registered in New York City
in
November, right at the time of the election. You were in Irvington in Westchester.
Why did you register as a
Mr. Mateo, let him answer. Okay, so Curtis, give us a specific date when you became a Republican.
Right before the lockdown is when I became a Republican at the Manhattan GOP meeting in which I was welcomed into the fold.
Why? They didn't endorse you. Why?
Why? Because, first of all, I got the endorsement of the Staten Island GOP and the Brooklyn GOP, which are the two powerful GOP candidates.
The question is, why did you enroll in the Republican Party? Why? If you hated, you didn't vote for Trump.
Because Governor
You're a never Trumper.
Can I
You're a never Trumper.
Yeah, now let him.
Can I answer the question?
Why?
Briefly, please.
By the way, you have never been seen in any way, shape, or form supporting Donald Trump before. Never in quotes, never at rallies. I question it. But,
gentlemen, I think we have asked and answered our questions. That ends our cross-examination round. We're going to go now to Josefa Velasquez for the next question.
Thanks, Errol. Let's talk about homelessness. As the city's emerging from the pandemic, there seems to be a rise in street homelessness. There's more people utilizing the subways for shelters, and a lot of these homeless individuals say that the shelter system is unsafe, leaving them with few options. One of the city's remedies so far has been to put people in hotels, but as we saw in the Lucerne on the Upper West Side, there was fierce opposition from locals. So New York City is legally required to guarantee a right to shelter. How would you implement that? Mr. Sliwa, let's start with you. If not hotels, where do these people go?
Well, I want to thank Fernando Mateo for saying not only do I ride the subways, but also I take care of homeless people. You said that, Fernando, and that is
you take care of everybody.
True. I understand homeless people. I understand the emotionally disturbed. I've been in so many shelters, especially the micro shelters, which are for the emotionally disturbed. Let me explain to your listeners what happens. You have to check in by 10 o'clock at night. That's curfew. And then they kick you out the door at 7:30 in the morning with nothing to do all day long. No programs. If you have alcohol problems or drug problems or emotional issues, you roam the streets of neighborhoods in which those shelters would jam down communities' throats with no transparency and no discussion. De Blasio warehouses the homeless people. What I'm going to do for these men and women who are in need and children is not only provide them with shelter, but also provide them with the services if they have alcohol addiction or drug addiction, or they have emotional issues. The city is not doing that now, and that is a sin. That's why I'm the compassionate candidate running for mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sliwa. Mr. Mateo, the same question for you. Where should these homeless individuals go if the locals don't want them in hotels and they don't want shelters in their communities?
What the city has done, what de Blasio has done, is put the homeless in conflict with different communities. Communities don't want them, and the homeless don't want to be where they're not wanted. The biggest problem we have is that the city, the government, is running these shelters. Government does not know how to run a business. I would privatize it. And I would do RFPs so that people that know and understand what building housing is all about, what building mental facilities is all about, what building food banks is all about, and I would allow them to go into our industrial parks because they're everywhere and they're out of the way. And I would bring public transportation into those areas for those homeless people that do have a job and those kids that need to go to school. But I would do it with dignity. I would not continue trying to allow government, the city, to run these shelters because it's proven that they don't work. We need to get people that know what they're doing to run these shelters, to provide real shelter for these people that are unfortunately homeless. That's what I would do. And I would make sure that we have that we cross our dots, that we dot our dots and cross our T's so that it's done the right way. I would stop putting a Band-Aid like Curtis Sliwa is trying to do because he really believes that he is the compassionate guy. He has no compassion. He laughs at me.
May I respond?
He laughs at me. Yes.
Briefly. Fernando, the difference is...
if you have a rebuttal, I will get a rebuttal too. If you have a rebuttal, I will get one too. I just want to make sure that we can do that. Relax.
Gentlemen.
Relax. Oh,
you're all emotional.
Okay. So I will ask my question then. So briefly, gentlemen, should communities have a say in where the shelters go in their neighborhood? Mr. Sliwa, let's start with you.
Absolutely. But more importantly, all of these entities have to trust the next mayor. These people trust me, the homeless, the emotionally disturbed, the subway riders, the residents in the neighborhoods that Fernando Mateo has not visited in Staten Island and Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx and Manhattan. They trust Curtis Sliwa because of my 42 years of dealing with all different groups. You sit them down, we can come up with solutions for the men and women, these souls who are so lost, who need our help. And Fernando, you don't have their trust.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sliwa. So, Mr. Mateo, the same question goes for you. Should a community have a say in whether or not a shelter goes in their neighborhood?
Yes, they should have a say, and I believe that communities should be the ones to decide where the shelter should go. God's honest truth is Curtis is over here speaking a very sad story. He is, he's the saint coming down from the skies to rescue the homeless. He has never done that before. Curtis Sliwa is a compulsive liar. People don't trust him. People don't believe in him. He is not a leader. I am a leader. I've led thousands of people in the right direction. I have been able to create more jobs in this city than he will ever create. And once again, he did not support our president. He did not support President Trump.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both for having a substantive discussion about this. So now let's kick it over to Brian.
Thanks, Josepha. And candidates, our next topic is the streets. We all have to share them, pedestrians and cyclists and drivers. As you know, under mayors Bloomberg and de Blasio, many bike lanes have been created. Both mayors have tried to discourage automobile use compared to the past. And now we have a new conflict between restaurants that have open street dining in parking spots and the drivers, the car owners in the neighborhoods who want those parking spots. According to Mayor de Blasio's numbers, he has sacrificed 8,500 parking spots to save 100,000 jobs. Question is, how much would you continue, freeze, or try to reverse these trends? Mr. Mateo.
I would reverse everything that Bill de Blasio has done because it's a disaster. You walk around the city and it looks like a shanty town. When we get snowstorms, how is sanitation going to clean our streets with all these shanties on the streets? What he did here, he didn't save 100,000 jobs. He's making those numbers up. He doesn't know what it is to work either. He's never owned a business. I would make sure that we clean up our streets. All these bikes on our streets taking up parking spots is crazy. There are sidewalks that are wide enough. There are parks that are huge. You go to the Upper West Side, and he's taken over at least 40 or 50 parking spots right in front of a park. You could move these bikes into the park where people still have plenty of room to walk.
Let me follow up briefly on the restaurants being able to expand out into the streets during the pandemic. Should that be made permanent, Mr. Mateo? Yes or no?
No, it should not be made permanent. What we should do is make permanent the fact that they could use their sidewalks, have sidewalk cafes. In restaurants that I have owned, they charge you for a 20-foot storefront, they charge you $30,000 a year. I would give those sidewalks to the restaurants.
Restaurants into the streets. Our time is short, so Mr. Sliwa, the same set of questions, yes or no on restaurants into the parking spots, and also would you continue to build, freeze, or tear out bike lanes?
Well, Brian, in talking about these issues, I noticed you didn't bring up the number one issue for all the residents of all 5 boroughs, the needless use of these speed cameras. The mayor has now put in place 2,000 speed cameras, and he's having them run 24 hours a day. In New Jersey, they eliminated the speed cameras. Long Island, they eliminated the speed cameras. As mayor, I'm eliminating these speed cameras because it's a tax. That's all it is. It's not about safety, zero vision, none of that. Obviously, restaurants that have extended into the streets, they've got to go back. And when it comes to bike lanes, if they use it, they should keep it. But if they're not using it, they should lose it. And there are a lot of neighborhoods that have bike lanes in which you never see a Pee Wee Herman or anybody on their bicycle rolling up and down. So they should lose those bike lanes.
Candidates, thank you for those answers. Errol, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Candidates, we're almost out of time, but I want to squeeze in a few more short lightning round style questions. Please keep your answers to a yes or no or just a few words. Let me start with this. Should the city bail out taxi drivers who are unable to pay back loans? Mr. Mateo?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Sliwa?
It should help them with the loans.
Mr. Sliwa, when's the last time you rode a city bike?
City bike. I have never ridden a city bike. I rode a Schwinn bicycle delivering the Daily News for years as a kid.
Mr. Mateo?
I would get rid of all the speed cameras in New York City. I will make sure that no one gets another ticket because of the speed cameras. That is wrong, and I will make sure that Staten Island knows that I will get rid of all those speed cameras in Staten Island.
Okay. Have you ever ridden a city bike, Mr. Mateo?
No, I have my own bike.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Mateo, would you direct the NYPD to work with federal immigration authorities?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Sliwa?
With ICE, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mr. Sliwa, should new police officers have to live in the 5 boroughs?
No, absolutely
Mr. Mateo.
not. Unless all civil servants are forced to live in the 5 boroughs.
I would allow police officers to live wherever they choose to live.
Okay.
And I would make sure that every police officer never pays another toll crossing a bridge or crossing a tunnel. That will be part of their package, making sure that they do not pay another toll in this city.
By the way, Marty Golden, former police officer, state senator,
the guy that you got fired,
has endorsed
Marty Golden.
me, Fernando Mateo.
Remembered. Okay.
Endorsed me.
More lightning round questions.
Hey,
Hey, let's get to it. Mr. Mateo, have you made a choice in the Republican primary for governor? And if so, who is that?
Well, Curtis needs to calm down. He's going to get a heart attack. I'm sorry, what was the question, Errol?
Do you have a choice in next year's primary for governor?
At this point, I don't. I haven't sat down with the candidates. I want to hear their agenda first.
Mr. Sliwa?
Likewise, it's too early in the process. let all the announced candidates debate, go out there, raise money, and in the future, endorsements will come.
Okay, Mr. Sliwa, what is your favorite and least favorite subway lines?
Oh, my favorite subway line. The L train, which used to be the lousy line, right? The L train that I grew up in Canarsie is now the best in terms of speed going up and down. And the worst line, without a doubt, the C train. You wait.
Yeah, that's my train. Yeah, that is the correct answer. Mr. Mateo. Mr. Mateo, what's the best, what's the worst?
I like the 2, the 4, the 5, and the A.
What?
And what
You don't ride the subways.
What's the worst one?
The worst one's actually the C train.
Yep, everybody agrees. Mr. Mateo,
Yes.
Who was the better mayor, Mike Bloomberg or Rudy Giuliani?
Both. I can't say there was one better than the other.
Mr. Sliwa.
Both. And by the way, I have my Trumpy bear here, which I know Curtis Sliwa has 13 cats. He has 13 cats. I have a Trumpy bear.
Mr. Sliwa. Sliwa, Bloomberg or Giuliani, who was better?
Rudy had the tougher job. He had to rescue the city with 2,200 murders a year. So he had the rougher lift to do. But Bloomberg was a good mayor, too.
All right. Now, what is the first cultural event, Broadway, sports, or otherwise, that you want to attend when the city has fully reopened, Mr. Sliwa?
Oh, Broadway. Absolutely. It's got to be Hamilton.
Okay.
All my sons, I have 3 sons. They love Hamilton. I want to be able to take them there. I know it's going to cost me a pretty penny.
Yeah.
I want to take them all to Hamilton.
Okay, yeah. I hear mortgage rates are low, so you should be able to get 3 tickets. Mr. Mateo.
He should be able to go anywhere he wants. He lives in a 320 square foot apartment with 13 cats.
What are you going to do?
The litter boxes are costing him more than the rest.
15 rescue cats,
Mr. Mateo,
The
sports, Broadway, or what? Once you get a full reopening.
I'm looking forward to seeing the Jersey Boys once again. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I love that play, and I want Broadway to reopen. It's the lifeline of the city.
I love that too. That musical. We agree. The Jersey Boys. We agree.
On that note, we're going to bring this to a halt. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us for this debate. And we want to thank everybody at home for watching. We want to remind everybody that the primary is just a month away. Early voting starts on June 12th. Primary day is June 22nd. If you want to register to vote, you have time. The deadline to register with the party is this Friday, May 28th. Thanks so much to the candidates. Thanks to our partners. Thanks to all of you at home. And have a great evening.